What did a teacher say or do to you that you've never forgotten? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. My parents had just divorced and they shared custody of us. When my mother had us, she wouldn't feed us, send us lunch, bathe or groom us, so we'd show up to school tired, hungry, and dirty. When my first grade teacher figured out what was going on, she started keeping a brush and wipes for me on her desk along with lunch money. She'd take me aside before other kids showed up and groom me and feed me. That was about 35 years ago, and I still think about her all the time. Ironically, her name was Mrs. Severe. What a beautiful soul. I really needed that maternal care that she gave me. Story 2. I faked my way through 4th and 5th grade math. I never understood how to do long division, but managed to hide that from the teachers and answer test questions by reverse multiplication. Basically, guess a number and multiply it out and see how close I would get, and keep doing it until I got the answer. My 6th grade math teacher figured out that I was faking and had no idea how to actually divide anything. She had me come in one afternoon to help with cleaning the erasers. All the kids fought for this privilege, so I was thrilled, sat me down and tutored me until I grasped the concept. Bless you, Mrs. Gillespie. Story 3. Once on the way to school, I found a kitten and couldn't leave it behind. It was dirty, hungry, and in need of help. I had to take it with me to school. At that moment, my parents were against me having a pet. And so, after school, as I sat there crying and not knowing what to do with the kitten, my teacher approached me. She calmed me down and took the kitten with her. After that, she sometimes brought him to class. This way, we continued to communicate. She named him Inkblot. As far as I know, he lived until he was 17. I will always remember this act, as she didn't break my little heart and saved the cute kitten. Double shot. Story 4. Okay, my school had this thing with the local university where we would get to visit. One year, it was just a day visit, but the next was a trip staying over. This thing was also linked to a bursary. I was on the list to go and went on the first year. There was this teacher that wanted to inspire the problem kids, put them on the right path or whatever. Anyway, for the second year, she took my name off so she could put the kids she wanted to inspire on the list instead. The trip meant missing a day or two of school. So of course these kids said yes, despite having no intention of ever going to university, whether or not they actually could, if they actually tried. And only went because they could miss school. When I spoke up, this teacher basically said that I had no chance of going to university, so I got to spend the day in empty classrooms with teachers asking why I wasn't on the trip. Spoiler alert, I went to university. Story 5. Junior year of college, I was taking an abnormal psychology class during fall semester. We had an exam scheduled for September 12th of that year. The day before was September 11th, 2001, and our classes were not canceled. We got to class. Everyone obviously devastated from the attacks the day before. Our professor got in front of the class and told us this: no matter what tragedies you witness or go through, life will not stop to accommodate your feelings or emotions. We proceeded to take our scheduled exam, but we had to remain in class until everyone finished. Once the last exam was turned in, she told us that she hoped we would take that lesson to heart, then threw the exams in the trash. Best lesson I've ever been taught. Story 6. I became quite close with one of my band teachers in high school and viewed him as a father figure in many ways. My parents were freshly divorced, and I was floundering without a male role model at all. My father never made attempts to see me. The teacher was noticing some changes in me and figured out the story. All it took was a sincere eyeball-to-eyeball statement of "I believe in you. You are better than you realize." And the sun shone brighter and the clouds parted a bit. When he retired, I made sure to go to his final school concert, and we caught up. It was amazing, but then I saw his wife of several decades. I walked over and introduced myself and thanked her for sacrificing their time together for all those years so he could be someone that his students needed in their lives. We both started crying and hugged. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Rizzo. You are better than you will ever realize. Story 7. In high school, I was the class clown who always made people laugh and was there for them. I put up a front, the happy and cheeriest one, but I was struggling so badly with mental health issues and hated life and myself, borderline suicidal. Anyway, one day when I was telling a joke and laughing with everyone, this one teacher took me aside and said, "You're such a joy to everyone, but I can see the pain in your eyes. Your place in this world matters and would be so much poorer without you. Don't give up. Well, goddamn, I thought I was so good at hiding it from everyone. And it kind of broke me that someone could tell. But yeah, a moment I'll never forget. Story 8. Mrs. Crutcher was my first and second grade teacher. She always wore high heels. One day in class, I passed out and she picked me up and carried me to the principal's office where the school nurse could examine me while my mom made her way to the school. I personally don't remember it, but my mom was always amazed that she carried me across the entire school in high heels without any issues. For Christmas that year and every year after, my mom made beaded earrings for her, and when my littlest sister was born, Mrs. Crutcher made a blanket for her. She was the best teacher I ever had. Story 9. 5th grade math. Teacher hated me for no reason and told me that math just isn't for me. I was the math champion of my school all years prior to that, so that just messed with me. I never had a lot of confidence, so I just figured he must be right about what he was saying. Ended up with a new teacher 2 years later and was eventually able to get very high grades in my AP math class. It messed me up for a good 4 years that, rather than instilling confidence in a struggling prepubescent girl who was trying her best, he chose to just disregard my potential and brush me off like this. Story 10. My creative writing teacher from high school invited me to play Scrabble with her on the last day of school. We played for like 2 hours, and before I left, she gifted me a first edition copy of The Bell Jar. Absolutely changed my life. Spending time with her and being acknowledged in that way at that age, I just realized that anything was possible for me, that I didn't need to limit myself. She lost her tenure that same year, but later became a travel journalist. I went on to get my MFA in creative fiction. We still keep in touch, and I keep my original copy of The Bell Jar in a glass case on my fireplace. Story 11. Here is a positive one. I had an English teacher that learned I was actually pretty passionate about poetry. He gave me a copy of one of Mary Oliver's books, and she has been one of my favorite poets since. Near the end of the year, we had a big project due, and that project was originally slated to be poetry related. A bunch of the other kids in class were annoyed and complained about it, so he changed the project to a movie review instead. He knew I was probably the only person disappointed by this change, and he let me know I could continue with the original project. He did little things like that to connect with his students and keep them engaged. I know that is a lot of work for teachers to pull off and not expected, but I really appreciated the effort and care. Story 12. In 6th grade math, we were using calculators for something or another, and I tapped the clear button a bunch of times because I had learned to hit it a few times in case it doesn't clear and messes up your next calculation. My teacher scolded me for playing with my calculator instead of paying attention. After class, I stayed behind to say, "Hey, I don't think that was fair. I was just clearing the calculator like I was taught." And she said, "Don't tell me what I saw. I know it would look like when kids are playing around." And I hated her every day for the rest of the year. Story 13. The nurse at my grade school would go to Goodwill on her days off and pick up clothing for kids who had hard home lives, and they would come in on Mondays, and she would let them shower and get ready in the nurse's office and give them clean clothes to wear and have them brush their teeth and do their hair for them. Every morning she had a rotation of kids she did this with, and they all showered every other day, and she washed clothing every night for them so they'd have clean clothes for school and not be picked on. She had been doing it for years, and no one really noticed, and I mentioned it to my mom in passing, and my mom got a bunch of other moms together, and it started a whole program at our school, and the nurse had a ton more help and resources. We lived in a rural farming community, and back then there were a lot of immigrant workers, so it ended up helping a lot of kids, and it was awesome to see our community come together over it. Nurse Rachel and her silently helping these kids for so many years was a big example to me of serving your fellow man and taught me a lot about not knowing other people's circumstances, so I tend to not judge people by those things now. Story 14. I was bullied throughout elementary school badly. I also had AD, but it wasn't a thing back then. I was always daydreaming and not paying attention in class. The teachers allowed this bullying and sometimes seemed to encourage it. One kid actually hit me in the stomach with a plastic bat when I was walking home one day. When one of the kids would pick up finished papers from everyone, they would make a little spray thing with their hand and pretend to spray my paper before they touched it. One girl had an older sister who had a car, and she would drive by me while the girl and her best friend would hang out the window and yell things at me, calling me a bitch, etc. I didn't even know what a or was. One day in class, it was getting pretty bad, and the teacher pulled me out in the hall. She invited my other teachers to join her. The three of them stood around me and told me that I was a failure. that I didn't apply myself. They said the kids made fun of me because of the way I acted. I still don't even know what they meant by that. I was quiet then, and that I deserved it. I don't remember all of the things they said to me. I was a little girl surrounded by adults saying horrible things about me. I was terrified and crying, and I still had to go back to class. This affected me so badly that I never trusted adults after that. I was scared of my teachers. I still have flashbacks of that one day, and I'm 45 years old. So here's a big f you to all those teachers from back then who helped make my elementary school days hell. Story 15. This isn't very positive, but when I was in high school I got very into painting and was actually very good. I liked to paint portraits and could paint very realistically. I had a good eye for color and blending. I don't have a lot of talents and didn't back then either, besides the sports I played. I was very depressed and painting helped. I never really finished projects though, but when my English teacher in 11th grade had us do a book project and wanted us to recreate the cover, I painted the cover of the book I chose. I spent so much time and effort and finished it beautifully. He loved it and asked to hold on to it for a year for next year's students as an example of what he wanted. He was raving about how my painting looked just like the cover. I told him I really wanted it back at the end of my senior year because it was my first finished painting and I was proud of it. Side note, I don't remember the exact reasoning that English class turned into basically art class for this project. I'm sure I'm forgetting some details about why he wanted us to do this. So anyway, senior year I was homeless because my parents kicked me out so I couldn't bring my paint stuff. I hadn't painted in a while and wanted to get back into it, and wanted my painting back for inspiration at the end of the year when I found steady living. I had literally just found out I wasn't going to graduate with my class because I missed so much school that year for being homeless. My teachers let me off classes for the day because I was crushed and they knew my situation, and I was given permission to muck about painting in the art room. So I asked him for my painting since it was the end of the year, and he said, "Oh, I threw it away." I'll never forget the indifference and the tone he said it in. I don't completely blame him. He probably genuinely forgot and maybe scrapped the project idea for that year's class. But that broke me more than anything else that had happened, and I just sat and cried all day. I haven't painted since either. Not necessarily completely because of that, but it made me too sad to paint for a while, and I never got back into it. So anyway, that is the one thing I remember from a teacher 14 years later. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.